to tell you, Most Worshipful, that I am a little nervous. I'm usually not on this side of the microphone in an interview, so be gentle.
Oh, well, actually, I'm going to be turning it over to you real soon.
Oh.
So for those of you who haven't had a chance to read the biography, and for those who are going to be watching this later on, it's my pleasure to welcome to the District 13 Zoom very worshipful and illustrious brother, Roger Nelson. Roger is the deputy of the Grand Master in District 27, along with being the personal representative of the Sovereign Grand Inspector General for the Valley of Spokane and Scottish Rite here in Washington, and the chief Rabban, in other words, the number 2 guy in El Katif Shrine in Spokane. All that said, Roger shared, not to share with us his Masonic background, but to share with us what he does, basically to allow himself to have a Masonic background, and that is the fact that he's been in broadcasting for the better part of 40 years now. His bio is on the District 13 Facebook page, but there are some things that I wanted to point out really quickly. Like he got started at the age of 17. Roger, what were you doing at 17? Or are you going to talk about that in your presentation?
Yeah, so much for a presentation. It'll just be me bloviating without drawing a breath.
He severely underestimates himself. Again, he was awarded Washington State Best Reporter of the Year and Best Investigative Reporter numerous years between 1985 and 1995 by the Society of Professional Journalists and the Pacific Northwest Radio and TV Directors Association. His work has been featured in a number of best-selling books on the Green River Killer case, and he's received international awards for his coverage of the Ted Bundy. Presently, he's on the business side. He's not so much on the microphone side anymore, as he pointed out. But every so now and then, especially when I find myself in Spokane and I wake up bright and early in the morning, Roger's voice comes over. As a gift to, if you will, I call it a gift to the fraternity. Roger was instrumental in getting us on the radio and on TV with many of the spots that you hear about the fraternity. He introduced us to a great program. And as a result, the awareness of the fraternity in the fact that we get to control the narrative has been outstanding. And so with that, my brothers, it's my pleasure to turn you over to my friend, very worshipful brother, Roger Nelson. Roger.
Thank you, Most Worshipful. Brothers, thanks for joining me. You ought to try Ambien. You'll have a much easier time of getting to sleep than having to go to a Zoom conference with an old burned out broadcaster. I am a D. Malay. I was a member of Tacoma, as was my father. I was a member of D. Malay in Pasco and in Kennewick, and I am a Legion of Honor holder as well, which I'm very proud of all of those. Candidly, if I had not had the gift of gab as a kid, I would probably be telling you today, would you like fries with that order for a living? I did not go to college. At the age of 17, I'd finished all of my requirements in college, and they told me that I could graduate as a junior. And so I went and talked to all of the recruiters, and the Navy sounded like a good idea. So after 6 hours of battery of tests, the Navy recruiter said, son, we'd like to get you to sign for 6 years. We'll teach you Chinese and Russian. We guarantee you a job with the CIA or the NSA when you get out. And we're going to put you in a place called Greenland. And it sounded really cool. And then I cracked a geography book and I saw that Greenland had the ice and Iceland had the green. And I decided I didn't want to be sitting on a block of ice for the next 6 years. So I went to Clover Park Vocational Technical Institute and took radio broadcasting. Much to my chagrin, most of the people there were there for their VA benefits and really had no intention of cracking the mic commercially for a career. And so in 6 months, I went and got a full-time job in broadcasting at a little gospel radio station with more watts in the light bulb than they had in the transmitter, and a 250-watt radio station in Sumner, and my career began. From there, I went over to Puyallup and worked for 4 years for what was at the time QP, became KRPM. I was actually on the air May 18th of 1980, that Sunday morning with Mount St. Helens broke. I was a DJ at the time, and we went wall to wall broadcasting, everything that had to do with Mount St. Helens. And it was my first immersion, trial by fire, into the news. a couple of people were listening to that broadcast that opened doors for me down the road. Got me interviews at places that I never would have imagined. Before I left, there was a young man who had moved to Puyallup from Mount Vernon. He was 14 years old and looking for a job in radio, and he had a pretty good set of pipes, but he also had a gift of gab. So we gave him a crack, and he made something of himself. I don't always align with him politically, but Glenn Beck did very well for himself, continues to have a worldwide following. He's a little bit to the right of Attila the Hun politically, but I wish I had 1/1000th of what his annual income is. At the age of 21, I applied for KOMO in Seattle as an overnight news anchor. They had never hired anybody 21 years old before. And it was a prerequisite that you have at least a bachelor's degree in journalism. And I decided to read the white between the lines in the posted job application, and went up there and applied anyway. And I got the job. And candidly, over the next 15 years or so, it was the best paid education a young kid with terminal acne could ever have. I worked at Como for a year, then got hired by King to go over and do mornings with Bruce Murdoch. And it was kind of a contract battle, if you will, and then went back over to KOMO for the last 12 years of my reporting career. My thing was really being a reporter. And at that time, and I'll try not to go down the rabbit hole of my subjective opinion of what I think of the press today, although I think that'll probably come up in the Q&A afterwards, was the golden age of radio journalism, in that there were maybe 10 radio stations nationwide that had radio newsrooms of more than 10 people, like KMOX in St. Louis, WABC, KNBC, KCBS in San Francisco, Cairo in Seattle, Como in Seattle. We had 14 radio news people just to do the newscasts at the top and the bottom, 15-minute sweeps after Paul Harvey or 45 minutes after Paul Harvey. And what it allowed for was long-form reporting, more than just 30-second story coverage. Many of the television and newspaper reporters could not understand why I was making so much money, not in quantity, but getting so many contracts from the Associated Press and United Press International, and getting bylines and beating them to stories. It was driving them crazy. And it was one of my greatest sources of joy. And my scam, if you will, is I had a stack of business cards, and I go down, this is back when cab drivers were a thing. I had a little deal. I'd go down to the yellow cab stand in Seattle on Westlake Boulevard, and twice a month I'd give out these business cards, and on the back side of it, it said, "I'll give you $100 for the best news tip of the month." And I got calls and pages 24/7 from cab drivers. And what's remarkable about that is people will say things in the back of taxi cabs like nobody else is there. And it's like having a bug in a room. So I would get these news stories, whether it be Dixie Lee Ray, who's pondering whether or not she'd just been defeated by John Spillman, whether it's Marty Seelig and his blueprints for a huge office tower in downtown Spokane and what he's going to call it, or whether it's, what have you. A number of stories came that way. Unfortunately or fortunately, some of the closest friends I made were police officers, and the police beat. Slept with police radios next to my bedside, chased fire engines. I hated to do that, but it was part of the job. And and spend a lot of time what I would call undercover and investigative journalism that candidly I don't think exists anymore because it's expensive for stations to employ individuals who know how to do it. It's also even more expensive because more often than not, many of those stories never make the air because they have to be vetted by attorneys. Covered the Green River case for a number of years. And then and I think it was about 1985, the last major story and a seminal point in my career is I was sent to Florida to spend a week interviewing victims' families and report on the doings in Stark, Florida on the Gulf side leading up to the execution of serial killer Ted Bundy. I say that it was a seminal event because I was thrown out of a diner. I had the police called on me, had a dog called on me from a victim's house. I felt like a vulture. It was difficult to process as a Mason, as a man, as a young man with a young family. A day before the execution, across the street from the penitentiary, there was a large field, grass field, and tractor trailer rigs started pulling in with carnival rides. And they began setting up dunking booths and t-shirt vendors and barbecue pits. And when I interviewed these individuals, it dawned on me when I connected with them, and that's really the best reporters are those that connect with individuals at a human level and really try to empathize and understand. There was a bloodlust in every one of those individuals' faces. So I took a different tack and I did a series of reports called The Ghoulish Carnival. And it wasn't so much about Bundy's execution, it was about the effect it had on the community around them. And when I came back from Stark and I was walking through the parking lot, and with the exception of a Steve Poole or a Gertie, Kathy Gertson, with whom I went to London in '86, I looked at the cars that the on-air people drove, and I looked at the cars that the business people drove, and the thoughts and the bad dreams I was having afterwards about that experience in Florida, not Bundy, but the community. I thought, you know what? I may be on the wrong side of this fence. And that's when I decided to get into the business side. And aside from now and then when they, if somebody goes on vacation, they ask me to crack the mic and fill in as a news anchor. I really don't miss it. I love writing. I love marketing. I love leasing ears for a living. I love the advent of the digital mediums that we have. I love helping Freemasonry because people are looking for what we offer. To kind of wrap things up, I will tell you that Paul Harvey was a close personal friend. So much so that when I went up to his room at the Alexis on, I want to say it's Fifth Avenue, he was getting ready to do a fundraiser for St. Vincent de Paul. He took his toupee off in front of me and put it on the mantle, and I shrieked, Paul! And he's from Chicago and, the Windy City. Paul, bless his heart, I don't think, even though Paul was Section 8 in the Korean War. And so he had some difficulties. He had cloth straps, snaps, sewn into his skull so that if it got windy, his toupee would not fly off. That's how close we were. But he was a very sweet man. He loved Angel very deeply. And for those of you that aren't Paul Harvey junkies, all of the rest of the stories were written by his son, Paul Jr. Got to interview hundreds and hundreds and thousands of marvelous people. Covered several presidents, several actors, several actresses, several musicians, several writers. And I will tell you that I saved virtually every single interview that I've ever done on reel-to-reel tape. And I have not ventured down into the vault, if you will, to start converting those digitally, but I will soon be doing that. I do have, if you're sharing your screen with me, I have two pieces that I want to share with you. The first one is just to kind of give you an idea what I would do on a daily basis. And the second is far and away, I got more calls and letters on the second piece. It's called a mini documentary than on any piece I've ever done. Forget the awards, because nobody pays their bills in brass and walnut. It's really about connecting with people. So I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to play these two if I can. Let's see here. Bear with me. There we go. All right. Can I go ahead and share now, Jim? Are you seeing my screen?
Not yet, but yes, you can share.
Okay, let's go ahead and try that then.
Something's coming across. Oh, that's Dan lost his phone. Here we go.
All right.
Disposable diaper makers are fighting in court over which company invented the leak shield. Roger Nelson of affiliate GOMO Seattle has the story.
Kimberly Clark, the maker of Huggies, is accusing Procter & Gamble, the maker of Pampers and Love, of patent infringement for its leak shield technology. Procter & Gamble counters did actually invented and patented the leak shield, and that its device is substantially different than Kimberly Clark's. Both sides are hoping federal judge William Dwyer will grant them exclusive rights to the leak shield technology. You might say that's the bottom line. Roger Nelson for ABC News, Seattle.
Wall Street, Dow Jones Industrials down.
Okay, and the next one is the mini documentary that I referenced, and honestly, of everything, it's probably the piece I'm most proud of.
I fish a lot, and I've always wondered whether my son would ever share the same love. Then last week, 3-year-old Jerry popped the question.
Why do you take me fishing?
My dad always said if you want to make fishermen out of them, make sure they catch fish their first time out. So it was off to Springbrook Trout Farm and Renton Saturday morning. Early Saturday morning. Begin lesson 1. Take the bait. Put it on a hook. Be careful. It's really short. Okay. See how Daddy puts this on here like this? Okay. Just so a little bit of the hook is out. Okay. Okay. Now, I'm gonna throw your line out there in the water and you're gonna catch fish. Ready? I, of course, gave him all the familiar prompting. Jerry, if you want to fish, you gotta hold on your pole. Don't get too close to the water. And Jerry added a few impromptu techniques of his own. That's a good looking first fish, Jerry.
No, I'm going to the middle.
5 fish later, we're heading for the car. Is he hooked? Do I have my new fishing buddy?
Now I'm going to go fishing too.
We'll go fishing real soon. Roger Nelson, Como News.
So yeah, that's, and I guess the reason I play that is, and I'll try to keep my, no, I'm not going to keep my opinion out of it. I think that's one of the main things that's missing in our enterprise journalism today are human interest stories that connect with us at a visceral level. Politics aside, One of my favorite presidents did away with something that was called the Fairness Doctrine. And the Fairness Doctrine required in broadcasting that you give both sides of any story. That if you were going to give the Republican side, you were going to give the Democratic side. If you were going to give a pro this, you have to give the con side of it. And I will tell you that I don't think even he anticipated what would happen to the polarization of our mediums today. A Fox News or a CNBC or none of these outlets could have survived under the requirements of the Fairness Doctrine. And I have a Muslim friend of mine that is looking into masonry in Grays Harbor County, of all places. He said, Roger, right wing, left wing, it's the same bird. Hopefully one of these days we're going to have a swing back to fair and balanced reporting. And I think it'll probably come under the auspices of something like an Associated Press. When I left journalism and stayed in broadcasting, I went to manage a couple of radio stations for 5 years in Aberdeen for the Weyerhaeuser Corporation, and then came over to Spokane. Goodness sakes, 22 years ago. To manage the Cougar Sports Radio Network in 28 cities. And during that time, the Mariners came to me and asked me to build a network for them to broadcast the Mariner games in Spanish, which we did for, I want to say, 4 years in 7 cities. And so now I write commercials and help clients build market share, whether they be advertising agencies or whether they be direct clients. Whether it's web pages or interstitials or mobile apps or selling ads on one of 7 different radio stations. But I have the best career a kid could have ever asked for simply because I had a gift of gab. Any questions?
First of all, Roger, thank you so very much for sharing with us. I have to ask, because you had mentioned that you had interviewed so many people. What would you say was your most notable, positive or negative interview that you've ever had?
Oh my. Barbara Billingsley was fun. She was a hoot. She set it up and she played it with me so well. She let me take on the Eddie Haskell. And so, oh, hello, Mrs. Cleaver. It's so nice to see you today. Oh, Roger, come in, have a cup of cocoa. And then I got her to speak jive for me because it was not long after Airplane. Try to pull that off today in 2020. She was incredibly gracious and genteel, and she was fun. Alvin Davis, Mr. Mariner, was great because I made him cry. And that wasn't the good part, but what was good is that he was able to, instead of just coming and pimping baseball, he was talking about being a food bank kid and what it was like to grow up with scarcity. And as a professional baseball player to come into 7 figures, to know how to be a good steward of those funds, given his background and how he knew the difference between being a resident and being a citizen, and a citizen gives back to his community. So what he was doing in his community to make sure that young men like he was were not growing up in want, that moved me. I got the Temptations, the surviving 3 Temptations, to sing, and I think I've got a short recording of it, to sing a cappella for me, the Isley Brothers Shout, which was pretty cool. I don't know, everyone's different and special, and you know, I've just been incredibly lucky.
So I'm going to open it up, but I do have a couple other things I do want to ask Roger. So everybody get ready with questions. Roger, you introduced us to radio advertising. When I say us, I mean the fraternity. We were sitting there watching everyone else talk about Freemasonry, and we were the only ones not talking about it. And talk to us about how we got to that point, if you will.
Well, we were the grand jurisdiction of Washington was certainly one of the first nationwide to reclaim the narrative, if you will, to use your vernacular, Jim. We wanted to make sure that we hit on the points that young men were thinking about and we're talking about, those things of civility, those things of citizenship, those things of heritage, those things of faith, those things of community service, those things of charity, to make sure that we address those. The second thing we wanted to do, candidly, is we wanted to be representational of our populace. We knew that we had several constituencies, and they weren't all white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. We wanted to speak to, everyone, whether they're rural or urban settings. And I think we did a pretty good job of that. We took some flack. I took some flack, and I wish my skin was a little bit thicker for the production value of the first set that we put out. But you were on 116 different TV and radio stations statewide for pennies on the dollar, and they weren't ads, they were public service announcements. But the point was, rather than having a pitch man talk to the millennials and Gen Xers who are already skeptical as hell about commercials, rather than have pitchmen talk about Freemasonry, we wanted Freemasons to talk about Freemasonry so that it had a resonance of truth. This is what I was looking for. This is what I found. This is what I've become. And in turn, this is what I'm doing for my community. And I don't think there's any other way we could have achieved that. The new ones I like. I think they're good production values, especially aesthetically. But I know Bill's a Husky. There's a psychology professor at the University of Washington by the name of Elizabeth Loftus, and she did a study, and echoic images, those that come through the ear, stay in the memory 6 times longer than iconic images. So those radio ads, I know that I'm naturally biased about radio, but things that we hear, we remember 6 times longer than things that we've seen. Those Masons talking about those personal experiences, many people will remember those throughout their Masonic careers, more so than the guy they saw on the TV screen. So how's that for a short answer?
No, that's awesome. And then the last question for me before I open it up. You mentioned Bill Miller. Bill Miller is, as everyone knows, is this incredible seeker of Masonic light. And I remember when I was running for Junior Grand Warden, you had specifically asked me what I was doing to seek more Masonic light. And so I'm going to ask you the question on behalf of a lot of people here: the search for Masonic light. Why is that so important to you?
Well, first, I have to give props to Most Worshipful Bill Miller, who has been a friend of my family for 3 generations. And I don't know how well he knew Benny, but he knew my dad very well. And I miss both of them very much. I became a Freemason to become a Scottish Rite Mason. I unabashedly, I have to tell you that. My grandfather was a 33rd and my dad was a 33rd. My grandfather was a vaudevillian in the first graduating class of Stadium High School, and both of them were thespians. Both were ritualists. And Shakespeare was right. The play is the thing. When ritual is communicated in dramatic form, emotions occur. And when a lesson is learned with emotions, it can be synthesized. And so that's why I became a Freemason. Why is the pursuit of light so important? That's the meaning of life to me now, and Freemasonry taught me that. Light to me means it's spiritual enlightenment, and most of that has come through Western mysticism and 33rd degree Masons like Manly Palmer Hall, for instance. But for me, and I'm speaking only for myself, I love the inclusive nature of Freemasonry as it relates to all things, including spirituality. And I love the fact that you have set me on paths in my pursuit for more light, that I can shorten the distance between me and the Creator without having to go through a toll booth.
That's That's a deep answer. Thank you for that. I want to open it up to anybody. I'm hoping that Dave Colbeth is here.
Thank goodness somebody went to sleep and put up a still.
Exactly. Because, David, you're doing this podcast thing, and I'm sure you got your podcast, hat on, and I'm sure you have a question.
Well, it is nowhere near the level of what Roger is doing or has done. So I'm far, far and away in the shadow. But it is absolutely something to aspire to. And I'll give a small props again to, and I know this is about Roger and his career, but the wheel that he put in motion with the Masonic advertising program. I was just at another event. Someone had retired, and we were out having a drink and didn't know anybody, and I didn't know them there. And one of the friends was saying that she said, gosh, I didn't remember that Mason still existed, but I just heard it on the radio the other day and I was surprised. And I thought, yep, there it is. And of course, all lodges that have taken advantage of it have reaped the rewards of that effort. And I know our lodge has in Auburn for sure. So thank you, Roger, for your efforts. And it was a very, very inspiring to hear a small connection. I don't know, you said you were at Como in the 80s.
Yeah.
Was that correct?
Yes. 11 years.
Yeah. In 88, I think it was, or it might have been 89, we did a bridge, a satellite bridge with King 5 and Gene Anderson for the high school, Soviet high school, and high schools in Washington. And I was fortunate to be part of that and got to see the behind the scenes aspect of broadcasting, and what just an amazing world. So it's so exciting to hear people talk about success, and the successful people always say, just as you've said, that if you can find something you love to do, you'll never work a day in your life. And it's so refreshing to hear you say that.
Thank you, my brother. I miss you, David.
Likewise.
Dan Moss.
Yes, Jim.
I'm guessing you heard that fishing story.
Well, I fished every lake in the state, and some of them in Canada, and a lot in Alaska. So I may have, yes.
I mean, I guess I'm wondering. Roger basically was telling the story about his first fishing buddy. Did any of that kind of sound familiar to you in your life and in all the fishing you did?
You have to realize that fishing is as much mental as it is physical. If you don't get the biggest shock on catching or having a bite from an 8-inch trout, it does the same thing when you have a bite on a 35-pound king, I assure you. And if you don't have that, don't waste your time.
Goodness. Sam Roberts, I'm glad you're here. Always good to see you.
Pleasure to be here.
Did you have a question at all?
So Roger, I do have a question, and it dawns on me, and I observe on almost every day that our television and radios cannot give an honest and objective news story at all. Somewhere along the line, somebody has to slide in their opinion or their view, and they do it very, very subtly. Now, my question is really this: has the public gone so stupid that they don't realize that this is happening and they're taking this as honest and objective news? Or has the media kind of wiggled their way into this, hoping that the American public or the public is kind of napping and doesn't get it? Where is this, and how do we stop it?
Well, obviously, my perspective is considerably myopic, and my opinion is very subjective. But I would say that I believe most people are of the same opinion as you and I, in that they are becoming weary of all of the extremes. And the market will dictate change. The market has to dictate change. And
The commercial market or the broadcast market?
Yeah, broadcast market. And I truly believe, and I've had this conversation with heads of state associations of broadcasters, and I've had this conversation with the head of the NAB. I truly believe that that most Americans are so upset about not having fair and balanced reporting that the first one that comes out that says we will guarantee you fair and balanced reporting and starts to fire people who aren't. I mean, that becomes their hallmark, that we do not accept government funding. We're responsive to the people, and our first and foremost is we're going to have fair and balanced and truthful reporting. The ratings swell, I think, will dictate. And I think once you get the first one to do it, but I almost think it's going to take someone like a Bill Gates. It's going to take someone with some deep pockets to start probably at a regional level, a media outlet, whether it's wire, whether it's print, whether it's television, whether it's radio, whether it's, I don't think it's going to be internet only, because they still haven't figured out their financial models. But I think once you get a platform, I think eyes are going to turn, because everybody's hungry right now. Everything's been so fractionalized. They're going to say, oh my goodness, look at how that thing's making money. Then they'll start, you know what? Maybe this far lean this way or this far lean this way is not going to be the future. I really do believe that it's going to take someone with foresight and vision to say the market's ready for it. Americans want balanced reporting again, because I don't think it's going to happen from Congress. They're not going to reinstitute the fairness doctrine. Not going to happen. Not going to happen.
I saw a graphic just the other day that listed out all of the networks
and where they lean.
Whether they were, and exactly how they lean left, right, or whatever. It was disgusting.
Yeah, and I would say they were pretty kind about it too. And that graphic is actually a couple of years old now. But when they put NPR as being the one closest to the center, regardless, they are fairly liberal, and they are fairly attached to being funded by the government. And so, politics aside, that's where their reporting is going to lie. So, it was quite remarkable.
Is there anything that we as individuals, I'm not talking about lodges or anything, as individuals should consider in maybe opening the eyes of the different networks? A letter writing campaign to your local TV station or your networks. Nobody reads that stuff. Or that's the appearance.
Yeah, I think ratings are what really matter. I consume so little broadcast media today. If I do, it tends to be the BBC or something else. I will go through and watch some of the networks, but most of it's packaging and promos. So I like long form broadcasting, and they don't have it anymore. So more often than not, I have to go to print and online mediums.
I'm streaming a lot of Canadian media.
Yeah, but again, they're owned by the Canadian government. They're not truly independent. Yeah. So, yeah, I don't think there's any easy answer, but it's foreign. Yeah. It's going to take somebody who's going to be the Carnegie of the new century. Who's going to be the Carnegie of the new century? That's what it's going to be. Carnegie created these libraries so that the masses could learn. Well, now we've got so much information and nobody's learning anything because half of it's crap. And social media that was designed to bring us together, has it done that? No, it's tearing us apart. It's crazy.
You can believe everything you hear on social media.
Yeah. I have to share one thing with you because some of my friends that I consider to be of at least average intelligence or average common sense in the past 7 months have started to espouse these crazy wackadoodle conspiracy theory ideas on the origin of COVID and the new version of what is it, 5Gen or the new cell phone technology, if you will. And I was
5Gen.
interviewing a crime and terrorism analyst on ABC who used to work for the NSA and CIA, and I said, how can this be happening? How can my friends be believing this stuff? And he said, wait a minute, think about it. ISIS and cults, the first order of business is to isolate that individual from his friends and family members so that they don't get even a breath of reality. So they start to believe the crap that they read and hear and are said. So what has the pandemic done? It's isolated us from our friends and family and an occasional breath of reality. And many of us are starting to believe this crap we see on social media. So yeah, it's scary stuff, man.
If you want to see some fringe
Go ahead,
work, come on out to Brennan. Brennan is just absolutely Brennan. You know, our media input, our news input in Brennan, well, most of it's, from the 1800s. So
still talking about posse comitatus, huh?
We're still talking about the Civil War.
Jesse Sorensen, good to have you join us. Did you have a question for Roger? Good. Gotta unmute.
He hit me with a chat and he says, how the hell am I ever going to get this 60 minutes of my life back?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Hello, my
All
brother.
right. I don't have any questions.
I see Jesse all the time. It's good to see you. Thank you for coming tonight, Jesse. You guys have been very gracious.
No. Well, Roger, I want to thank you for sharing a little bit of your history with us. One of the things that we've been able to accomplish with these Zoom meetings is that, strangely enough, we've gotten to know each other a little bit more. A lot of times, especially when you go to lodge and you see like a wall of past masters on there, they're pictures on a wall, and nobody bothers to ask a question about them. For the longest time, our past Grand Masters were like pictures on a wall, and nobody bothered to learn a little bit about them. And sometimes, the man we call brother, we don't know what he's all about. Like a couple of weeks ago, we learned about Mike Pretty and his hobby of bladesmithing, which was just a lot of fun to learn about. And other things like that. And by the way, Wednesday, if anybody's interested, Wednesday, my lodge, Frank S. Land 313, is hosting a Zoom meeting where Very Worship Brother Zane McCune is going to talk about his dad, Don McCune. So we're going to learn a little bit about Captain Puget, somebody who I grew up with as a kid. Little did I know that one of my dearest friends in Masonry, there's a connection there. But it's important that we get to know, that we get in. And so if something positive is happening out of this, these type of meetings are existing to allow us to get to learn more about everyone. So Roger, thank you so much for sharing a little bit about your life with us. It's fascinating. I'm looking forward to when you digitize your library. And by the way, if you look over his shoulder, brethren, you're going to see that's vinyl up there. That's on that wall. That's not CDs. That's vinyl up there. So
it just means I'm old.
How much vinyl you got up there? You said earlier.
About 1,500 albums, but most of that is Masonic books and stuff. But I will tell you, I'm not OCD, but they are alphabetized, the albums. Yeah.
I thought you were going to tell me they're alphabetized and categorized.
No.
Vinyl doesn't mean you're old. It just means you're timeless.
Oh, thank you, Ryan.
We love the vinyl. Any event, again, Roger, thank you so very much for spending some of your time with us. It's most appreciated. This is being recorded, so it's gonna hit the District 13 YouTube page, and so we'll send you the link, and hopefully other people will get to watch when we post it on our Facebook page as well. Because what a fascinating life you've lived, and I'm looking forward to when I get over there and sitting across the table with you.
Thank you. Miss you guys. Let's meet together soon.
Absolutely. We'll talk to you soon, Roger. Thanks everyone for coming. Bye-bye now.